Have you ever wondered why you should have a power of attorney or representative or attorney helping you with your veteran readiness and employment benefits? Well, this particular video, we're going to talk about it because there's a lot of confusion. I want to answer those questions as a veteran rights attorney myself. Hey, I am Benjamin Krause, and this is the Veteran Rights Podcast, where veterans talk law, life after service, and the fight to get what we have earned. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of power of attorney, having a representative, and what having a real attorney can do when it comes to veteran readiness and employment benefits, why it matters. I represent veterans quite frequently when it comes to VR&E benefits, and there are some real key times when we run into some issues where having the power of attorney on the phone or having the power of attorney, present really matters. And so whether you are a veteran who is using a free veteran service officer or whether, you hire an attorney, whatever is happening, sometimes it's very important to get somebody else on the call so that when you're doing a video chat or a phone call with VR&E about a contentious matter, that you have a witness. Very, very, very important. And so I'm going to explain 3 key reasons when this really matters. The first and foremost is if you're dealing with a contentious issue. So if you are aware that what you're working on is potentially contentious, where you get the sense that the counselor does not or isn't willing to take the steps to get you approved, at that point it is very important that you have somebody else on that call, especially if it's contentious, especially if you have a feeling in your gut that something is going wrong. It's very important to have somebody else on the call because sometimes what you say can be used against you. Sometimes what you say, you don't actually say it. The counselor just writes it down. Right? So this is an instance where what you say can and will be used against you at times. So VA does not tell veterans that, including in VR&E, and they will solicit information. This is a long-standing challenge within VR&E, has been whether they're obligated to allow a representative to be on the call with a veteran. Some offices still push back on this, which is crazy because we've had attorneys have legally been able to work on these cases now for almost 2 decades for pay. And before then, there were plenty of attorneys working on VA matters, right, who are accredited, who are allowed to do that. It is very clear that a veteran has the right to a representative of their choosing at any stage in the claim or appeal. Any stage. It doesn't matter when. That means any, right? But there are still some counselors that bristle against this. They don't want you to have representation there. And I'm about to explain part of the reason as to why. So part of why this is going on is the counselors trying to bully the veteran into making a decision or consenting to something that is against the veteran's interests. Again, against the veteran's interests. What we have seen, unfortunately, are counselors providing bad legal advice to veterans to try to do usually one of 2 things, either to accept a lesser goal than they otherwise thought that they were going to get. That's the first one. So in other words, accept a bad vocational goal that they didn't want, or 2, to close their case out prematurely and to basically consent or whatever to closing it out without getting appropriate due process, appropriate explanations as to why they're doing it, things like that. It's very important. So if you're a veteran and you're in veteran readiness employment, we want you to be encouraged to have somebody else on the video call if you know that it's a contentious matter, right? So if you're trying to get approved for a type of goal or plan that the counselor's already kind of intimated they don't want to approve, it's really important, vital even, to have somebody else on that call. So that's the first thing. The second thing, though, is when the counselor is trying to give you legal advice as to why you should close. What we frequently see is a counselor telling a veteran that it's going to take too long for them to get approved for a particular training goal. So, rather than go through the process to get them approved, which sometimes can take up to a year, right? They will tell the veteran, oh, you know what? Just reapply. It'll be fine. I see this very frequently. We hear about it in the Facebook group. We have over, 46,000 veterans in our Facebook group. If you haven't seen it, it's dedicated to VR&E. Better check it out. But we see this come up quite a bit. And these veterans are, unfortunately at a significant disadvantage when they're not receiving legal advice from an attorney like me, a VA-accredited attorney, or at least getting some kind of support and feedback from a free VSO on that same, video call, or even a spouse or caregiver or somebody else that's just on the call listening. Like, does this make sense? Why would I do this? So it's key, vital. When you're in a contentious matter, have the meeting with your power of attorney present. If the power of attorney is unavailable, try to get it rescheduled. This is key. Or check to see if the power of attorney believes that they need to be on the call, but always check. Don't think for a second that counselor has gone out of their way to make sure your power of attorney knows, because most often they don't. Most often the counselor prefers to have unfettered access to the veteran to try to get him or her to agree to something that they otherwise would not agree to. So it's key, vital. You want somebody there to be a witness to what's going on. Have VA put what they propose in writing. At least think about it a day or two. If you do have to be there alone, don't just agree to something on the phone. Make sure they explain it in writing. That way there's a paper trail. Always want a paper trail when it comes to VRE. Never trust what they are verbally saying. If they're not willing to write it down, there's a reason. I'm going to say it again. If VR&E is not willing to write it down and that counselor won't reduce what they're telling you to do into writing and sending it in an email, there is a reason. Be very suspicious of any counselor who tries to get you to do something without writing it down. Again, this is a very complicated system. At the present time, counselors have twice as many cases as they're supposed to. They're presently recruiting, in my opinion, unqualified people to serve as VR counselors and VR specialists. When they're not recruiting, there's plenty of them out there in the labor market right now. They're just not recruiting them. It'd be no different than going in to see a doctor and you end up with a nurse. And I'm not even talking nurse practitioner. You end up with a nurse, not the doctor, and not even a nurse practitioner, just a nurse. That's what we have going on within VA, VR&E right now. And they're recruiting the wrong people, and they're watering down the service quality to turn this into, in my opinion, more of a button pusher system, similar to the GI Bill, without the fidelity that veterans deserve who have disabilities and documented employment handicap and serious employment handicap situations, right? So they're doing this terrible disservice to veterans. It is horrible. So what you need to do is you need to make sure that you have somebody present when things are contentious, whether it's a caregiver or a friend, whether it's a power of attorney that's a VSO or an actual attorney or even a claims agent, somebody willing to sit there with you just to hear what's happening and to serve as a buffer, right? A witness. If you're running into a serious contentious matter where you have $100,000, $200,000 in benefits at stake, you better think about going out there and getting a case eval from an actual VA-accredited attorney, because there's too much at stake. And if you don't have the right information in front of you at the time, you may forever lose that opportunity. And it's a real shame, because this program is great when it functions properly and when the people have appropriate caseloads and when the counselors are correctly trained and when leadership really have the best interests of veterans in mind. But unfortunately, right now, what we have is leadership within VR&E that seem to care more about quotas, seem to care more about how their numbers look than the best interests of veterans. I think that some of these people may even be willing to engage in fraud or abuse to try to make that happen, to make their numbers look good at the disadvantage of the veterans that they're sworn to help. Remember, this program is supposed to help veterans to become independent in activities of daily living to the best of their ability and to maximize their ability to gain and maintain suitable employment. So maximum independence, maximum employment, not the other way around. And what we see very frequently are counselors closing out these cases without doing the right thing, without doing the right development, without actually engaging in the duty to assist, just to close out that case. They're required to assist you. It is no different than a VA examiner doing a disability compensation assessment, where they're required to look at the evidence, they're required to do a review, to take in oral testimony and reduce it into writing. But frequently what we're seeing now is a VR&E program that's starved for competent counselors. And the leadership within VRE is letting it happen. Within Office of Field Operations, within Veterans Benefits Administration, right? And we have new leadership there right now. Paul Lawrence. Where's Paul Lawrence at, Dr. Lawrence? Where are you at? These veterans are getting screwed. Representative Van Orden, you know what's going on. But your solution is to lower the standards for counselors? No way. Give them the money they need so they can hire appropriate help. You browbeat the program and the previous leadership left. They were at least doing a reasonable job trying to get the things working. Now we have people that appear to be caring more about quotas and making the numbers look good. And guess what's going to happen? You're going to have a bunch of disgruntled veterans on your hand. They're going to be ramped up, and it's going to make the present administration look bad. Why would you want that? Why would you want the Trump administration to piss off a bunch of veterans? That doesn't make sense. It's a bad idea. Why would you be doing that, especially to disabled veterans who are frequently vulnerable or they lack skills to go get appropriate work? Why not give them the money they need to do great? We're giving all kinds of money to Ukraine. We're giving all kinds of money to Israel, to these other countries. I thought it was America first. What is this? It makes me sick. I can't believe I'm watching this go down. America first? I mean, it's like veterans last. I'm sorry. Where's the money going? What happened? We have almost a $500 billion budget going to Veterans Affairs, but they can't afford to hire appropriately trained counselors. This program only costs less than $3 billion. It is a tiny drop in the bucket compared to the big overall spectrum of what VA is. Why are we not hiring appropriate people to help vets? You're not going to be able to outsource this program. You're not going to be able to have people that aren't properly trained do the work. It's too complicated. It cannot be reduced to an algorithm. Disability compensation is failing under the AI programs that it has now. Certainly not working right, and you're going to end up with a backlog there. But now we're seeing, this garbage within VR&E. Like, I'm sorry, but you're not going to be able to systematize this that way. It requires very competent counselors to help. It used to be that we had counseling psychologists there, and I'm sorry to anyone that says, well, there aren't anymore. That's garbage. There are plenty of schools training counseling psychologists either at the master's degree level, in a terminal degree, or in a graduate degree that are counseling psychologists that have even a graduate degree that is a doctorate. There are people out there with that type of training. I don't know why we changed it to only having rehab counselors doing the initial evaluations, but now we're barely even able to do that correctly because the training is so poor. What happened? It's the second largest funded agency in the entire country in the cabinet. And this tiny program where you can help disabled veterans re-engage in society, help them gain to the maximum extent feasible, suitable employment that they gain and maintain. Again, to the maximum extent feasible. That is what Congress said for the program to do. That is what VA has agreed to do within its own regulations. So why aren't we doing it? Why aren't we following this type of approach? It seems really straightforward. It should be happening. It's not. So if you're a veteran and you're affected by this, or you had somebody who, wouldn't let you have a power of attorney or wouldn't let you have somebody else present during the meeting, what you need to do is you need to contact your U.S. congressman, U.S. senator, and have them do a congressional inquiry into that office and say, well, why wasn't this veteran allowed to have their representative present? Why? We have a country where an accused criminal can have an attorney present. You have a right to representation of your choosing. We have a situation where we have illegal aliens where they have a right to representation. But when it comes to veterans, somehow veterans lost that right when they took the uniform off. But when you have the uniform on, well, sure. But when you take it off, oh no. We need to handhold you. You don't have a right to an attorney when you're first going in for those benefits. And now what we're seeing is even if you paid for an attorney, some of these counselors are pushing back, and this has been going on for a long time. But now we're seeing this quota thing kicking up with DOJ. Everyone's focused on the numbers and not the quality. Reach out to Representative Derek Van Orden. He's in charge of oversight for VR&E. He's the one that browbeat prior leadership within VR&E until they removed Nick Pamprin and the deputy director Irwin left. They're the ones that did it. They made it into a pretty hostile environment. And now what are we seeing? We're seeing basically a race to the bottom within VR&E. It's the gem of vocational rehabilitation. Derek Van Orden used it, the Navy SEAL chief, retired, who is in charge now, representative, used it for 1 year of law school anyway, and is now an elected official. He's intimately familiar with this. I bet his case was probably managed through St. Paul Regional Office. So when we are looking at this, why are veterans, Representative Van Orden, having a tough time here? Why aren't you making sure that this program gets the money it needs? With Republicans in office, in charge, Why are veterans having this kind of problem? It is grossly inappropriate. This is not how a Christian nation should function. We shouldn't thumb our nose and turn our backs on veterans. This is horrific. You better fix it. You better fix it, because eventually you're going to need to get reelected, Representative Van Orden, and anyone else that's not doing enough to help vets in this program. These are disabled veterans trying to give back. They have families. They paid the price. You just need to give them enough money to have appropriate counselors approve programs that are to the maximum, not the other way around, to do it right. It's on you, bud. Anyway, I'm sick of this. I'm going to keep doing these videos because this is enough. It's enough. This is not what we were promised under the Trump administration. America first. Like, give me a break. It's not what's happening. Certainly the veterans aren't being put first. That's certainly what we're seeing here. We're going to keep talking about it until President Trump hears, until his people hear, until this information makes it out. People start to see what's happening. It's just a tiny program. Do it right. Fix it. Make sure the people are competent. You can't have somebody with an undergrad do these evaluations. You really shouldn't even have a rehab counselor doing it. Really should have somebody with more training. Until next time, this is Benjamin Krause, veteran rights attorney, and this is our Veteran Rights Podcast. Tune in next time and we'll talk more about law, life after service, and whatever else that comes up. Take care. God bless.